Good day, everyone. This is Alan Schimmel. Welcome to another DevOps.com webinar. Today's webinar is sponsored by our friends at PagerDuty and is entitled Introduction to Being an Incident Responder. For anyone who's unfortunately had to be either a leader or part of a team for a major incident response operation, whether it be in a war room or not, you know how pressure-packed and chaotic it can be. In this webinar, we're going to look at what exactly is incident response, what are the different roles involved in incident response, responder, commander, etc., how to incorporate learnings from previous incident responders and best practices, and what are the skills for success that will help you and your organization get through a major incident with as little damage as possible. Our guest for this webinar is Eric Sigler, head of DevOps at PagerDuty. Eric is somewhat of an expert on incident response, and I think you'll find this webinar very, very helpful. So without anything further then, let us go to our webinar today, which again is Introduction to Being an Incident Responder.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us today for our incident responder training. We'll be going ahead and getting started in a few minutes after waiting for a few more folks to jump on the line. So thank you so much for your patience, and we'll get started very soon. Thanks.
Howdy, my name is Eric Sigler, and I'll be your host for today's webinar, Introduction to Being an Incident Responder. Before we dig in, we have a few housekeeping items to put in order. During the session, you can enter questions in the box on the left, and we'll answer them. During the session, you can enter questions in the box on the left, and we'll answer them at the end of the presentation. If you have questions after the webinar, which should take about 30 minutes, you can simply email webinars@pagerduty.com with the subject Intro to Incident Response, and we'll get your questions answered. Also, should you want to rewatch or share this presentation with your colleagues, it will be available on demand shortly after completion. Now that we're done with the housekeeping, let's get on with the show. Today, I'm going to go over a few different topics around incident response, and specifically the role of an incident responder. By the end of this webinar, you'll have a better understanding of incident response, how to act as a subject, and how to act as a subject matter expert. In a previous webinar, we went over how to be an incident commander, which is available on demand to stream if you're interested. For a little background on myself, I've been working in operations for almost 15 years and have led incident response teams at multiple companies. I'm one of the incident commanders here at PagerDuty, and I still get woken up at 3 a.m. on occasion. So, first up, let's define some basics. What is incident response, and why should we bother having all of this structure? Well, it's an organized approach to addressing and managing an incident. By adding in a consistent structure and process, you get two key benefits. Responders don't have to spend valuable time figuring out issues not directly related to the incident at hand. They not only get a time benefit from having prepared processes, but they also have to spend less cognitive effort on things that aren't the problem they're trying to solve. The second benefit is that the rest of the business has a better understanding of how to find out more about the incident, who's involved, and how it will be handled. You can think of incident response as rapidly forming a one-off team to solve a specific problem. And every team needs structure provided, goals defined, and expectations set. If you haven't already, your first step as an organization is to define what an incident actually is. It may sound kind of silly, but if you're not sure whether or not something's an incident, you don't know whether or not you need to respond to it. Here is PagerDuty's definition of an incident. Any unplanned disruption or degradation of the service that is actively affecting customers' ability to use that product, to use our product. Your organization's definition might be different, and that's okay. Just make sure that you have a definition of some kind somewhere that everyone can see and agree to. Preferably, keep the definition simple. And when the problem isn't as simple, you need to understand the definition of a major incident. Again, here's PagerDuty's definition of a major incident. Any incident that involves a coordinated response between multiple teams. Normal incidents can be often handled by a single team, but as soon as we need to involve others, we step up our processes. This may end up in one or more severity levels, and many organizations end up having a graduated response to problems, severity 5 to severity 1, or so on. The goal with all of this isn't just to solve the problem. It's to do it in a way which limits the damage and reduces the cost associated with an incident. The less time spent on unplanned work generated by an incident, the more effective your organization can be. Every organization will need to define their own processes for handling an incident. And while every organization will have unique needs, there are some common systems that you can use as a starting point. PagerDuty's process is heavily based on the National Incident Management System and Incident Command System. This was originally developed by the U.S. government for wildfire response, and it's now used from organizations as diverse as your local fire department to the Federal Emergency Management Agency to technology companies like Airbnb and PagerDuty in order to have a standardized response that everyone is familiar with. One of the key points for our process that we learned is that we want anyone to be able to trigger an incident response at any time. Monitoring tools, automated alerts, and the like all have their place, but we want to make room for the humans as well. This is really important for us at PagerDuty to lower that barrier to triggering an incident response, which we found has led to a dramatic increase in the speed with which incidents are resolved. We've had interns all the way up to C-level staff trigger an incident. We don't want anyone to sit on something just because the alarm hasn't gone off yet. To make your incident response metrics more meaningful, for example, knowing what your mean time to acknowledge or your mean time to resolve is, talk amongst your team or teams, and agree on when and how you should acknowledge and resolve incidents. Generally, we recommend that acknowledgments should happen when a user is taking ownership and investigating an incident. And then we also recommend that resolutions should happen when the incident itself has been fully resolved. This gives you a much better visibility into the shape of an incident, which we'll talk about later on in postmortems. Okay, now with our definition of an incident and some idea of how it might get triggered and the initial reception of that incident, we need to put in place some structure. Specifically, what roles do we need in order to handle a problem, and who should do what in each of those roles? Here's a slightly modified structure from the Incident Command System. At PagerDuty, we don't exactly use the same setup. We picked out the roles that work the best for us. Overall, though, the idea is to separate out two distinct sets of work from each other. One set of work is the people focused on solving the problem, incident responders or subject matter experts. And another set of people is focused on driving the process forward to resolving the incident, effectively a form of meta problem solving. Those are the incident commanders, deputies, scribes, and so on. Today we're going to focus on the incident responder or subject matter expert role. A subject matter expert is the person with the most ability to solve a given problem. Different teams will have different experts, and subject matter experts don't necessarily have to be a team lead or just the individual person who might be the on-call for that shift. When you get assigned an incident, know when to reassign that incident as a subject matter expert or to escalate it. There's a couple of different examples that you can do with this. For example, if you're already working on a separate issue and you aren't immediately able to look into the incident that you're assigned, you can reassign it to someone else or to escalate it. This is a conversation you can also have later on with an incident commander. And this goes back to our definition of an incident that we discussed earlier, the fact that anyone should be able to raise the response level at any time. You can also, just by the way, for PagerDuty, you can always escalate an incident or reassign from the mobile or web app. Once you've been assigned that incident and you're starting to dig into it, it's time to join the call and check in with the incident commander, and so that they know that you're part of the response now. A really simple way of doing this is when you first join the call, offer up who you are and ask who the incident commander is. That's all the information that you need at the beginning as a subject matter expert. The incident commander will bring you up to speed as part of the polling loop later on. For example, hi, this is Eric. I'm the ops on call. Is there an incident commander on the call? And then the incident commander should respond back, hi, this is Eric, this is Rich, I'm the IC. In that conversation, I conveyed who I am, what role of an SME I'm playing, and tried to find out who the incident commander was. Really importantly to remember, especially as a subject matter expert, is that incident commanders don't resolve the incident. They're responsible for coordinating and delegating all the tasks. In some fire departments, for example, they have a saying. Incident commanders wear white hard hats to distinguish themselves from the people actually doing the work, or subject matter experts. The phrase goes, if you ever see someone with a white hard hat holding a wrench, take the wrench out of their hand and bonk them on the head with it. The point being, any individual on an incident response should only be doing one role at a time. If you're a subject matter expert, you can't ask the incident commander to do a task. If the incident commander is the person best able to do that task, they're going to need to swap their role with someone else and make it an explicit handover. As a subject matter expert, you'll see the same loop as an incident commander, but from a very different perspective. Remember, the idea here is that the incident commander is driving the process forward. So as a subject matter expert and as an incident responder, you can keep your heads down and working on the problem. So that way you have a consistent structure and know when you need to listen and when you can continue to focus on the work at hand. It starts by the incident commander polling all of the subject matter experts, that's you, for status. Subject matter experts, in turn, will each offer a status report. We'll talk about effective ways to do that in a moment. The incident commander will then make or facilitate decisions to move the incident hopefully towards resolution and dispatch tasks as necessary. Finally, the subject matter experts will offer up task status, which can start this loop all over again. Oftentimes, people might just offer status reports by kind of blurting out whatever it is that they see. And if you take a moment to structure the information you're providing, it can be far more effective in an incident response. A can report is a basic mnemonic for conditions, actions, and needs. It's an effective way of conveying information in a structure, separating out the different elements of a report explicitly so that everyone can understand the context. Someone needs to reboot the server isn't a very useful status report, but the server is non-responsive. I propose rebooting it. I will need someone from the operations team to do so, provide similar information in a much more useful structure. Now that you've gotten a polling loop and you've found out who the incident commander is and who the subject matter expert is, and you've provided some conditions and actions and needs, you're going to need to start making decisions. As a subject matter expert, at some point you'll need to take an action that may have additional consequences. That's when it's a good time to surface the issue to the incident commander. Don't jump the gun and just start doing things. Make sure that your fellow responders have visibility. They may be influenced by the actions you're taking. The incident commander is there to facilitate the discussion and come to a decision. And they're the ones in the hot seat for making sure to account for the risks and taking responsibility for the incident. Unfortunately, when presented with a choice that people disagree with or a decision, sometimes different subject matter experts or other participants in an incident may avoid raising a concern because they don't feel that they have the room to do so. For example, a question like this: I think we should restart the load balancers. Should we? A question from the incident commander or maybe another team member phrased like this gives too much room to either stay silent or object for reasons that don't have anything to do with moving the incident forward. Both sides of a debate lose out when it's framed this way. Remember that the role of the incident commander is to facilitate the discussions, and one simple change can completely alter the framing of that discussion. Phrase, "Are there any strong objections?" This is one of the most useful phrases you'll hear across the whole of the incident response process. They're to frame the discussion. The proposed action may or may not be the correct one, but if it isn't, you can discuss it rapidly and clearly. And if you have any objections, as a subject matter expert, you raise them at this point, not 5 minutes before or 5 minutes after, but at the point in time that the decision is being made. And so you'll hear something like this from an incident commander. The proposed action is to restart the load balancers. Are there any strong objections? That's your opportunity as an engineer to raise additional visibility, possibly into other issues that might influence this decision, or to state very quickly what your perspective is. If you don't think restarting the load balancers is the correct action, you can raise that, but then do so quickly and move on to the next point of discussion. However, sometimes people won't necessarily agree with the incident commander making decisions, and they might try to overrule the decisions or make their own decisions. If you start making your own assertions or trying to run the incident yourself, the incident commander is likely to call you out on it. You might hear something a little bit like this: "You wish to take over as the incident commander." Usually this is a not-so-subtle prompt from the incident commander that you might be stepping on their toes or the toes of other team members who are trying to drive the incident forward. Another sort of cognitive rat hole that you can fall down is hindsight is 20/20. And it's tempting in the middle of a call to start pre-postmorteming it or naming and shaming what might have prevented the problem. We should really have fixed this cron job last week. This isn't the most useful spend of time on a call, especially if the incident's ongoing. So you might start to hear something from the incident commander like, "We're in the middle of an incident. Please keep your comments until the end." The IC should direct everyone towards making sure that the feedback or the analysis is captured. It's important to take these learnings forward, but then drive the conversation back towards solving the problem. Don't take it personally if this happens to you. sometimes you'll run into issues as a subject matter expert that aren't necessarily clearly one severity or another. As a rule, you should always treat a problem as the most severe it could be until you can prove otherwise. Don't spend time on the call debating if it's really one level or another. Get the facts and prove it. Again, lots of folks will wake up at 3 a.m. and not necessarily know, is this a valuable thing to be doing at this moment? And so as a subject matter expert, you might expect as an incident commander to say something to the effect of, we do not discuss incident severity during the call. We're treating this as severity 1. Once you've spun up the gears of an incident response process, you may as well finish it. It gives you practice, and it also gives you an opportunity at the end of the process to adjust your definition of an incident so that you can have a more consistent and clear picture going forward. Now that you've got the incident assigned to you and you're working on it, one thing to be aware of is that you can stop incidents from distracting yourself and others by snoozing them in the PagerDuty app. If you've acknowledged an incident and know that's going to take a while to resolve it, then you want to snooze it. It can extend it up to 24 hours, and it's great if you don't want yourself or your incident response team members to be re-notified about something you're already working on. Once you've finished handling an incident, though, there's still a few more things you should do, and even as a subject matter expert, you should be focusing on these. Don't just give all of the work to the incident commander. The first and foremost is performing some kind of a postmortem. As a subject matter expert, you'll be contributing a lot of information, observations, those 20/20 hindsights that you could have thought of. You just spent several person hours and customer impact learning something. Make sure to capture all of those details, even if it's what not to do. A properly performed postmortem lets you apply the learning that you just completed into your organization and hopefully help prevent issues from happening in the future. Of course, when you go through your postmortem process, ensuring that it's blameless is key. Without it, you get into a vicious cycle of people blaming other people, which in turn causes those other people to be less transparent in the future, which in turn causes more failures and more blame. Stay away from that vicious cycle and just describe the problem. Don't worry about blaming the people. And while you're working through your postmortem process, be aware of certain cognitive biases that you may not normally encounter. A quick summary of 3 of them. Beware of counterfactual reasoning. A quick check for this in language is, this server would likely have survived except we forgot a cron job to clear the temp directory. You're now no longer discussing the problem that happened. You're discussing an alternate universe in which something else might have prevented the problem, but you're not really able to understand what other things might have come up in that alternate universe. Just describe the problem as it happened. Normative language is a cognitive bias where you sometimes assume that everything is one way and then the problem was a deviation. We had insufficient monitoring on that host for CPU. Well, again, you had that host had the level of monitoring that it did before the incident for a reason. Don't try to normalize the problem into this was the deviation. Finally, mechanistic reasoning is a cognitive bias that will come up more and more often as we build distributed systems, as we build systems that are dependent on third parties for a lot of their functionality. And this is assuming that the system is in perfect working order until the incident. If a network problem is at 49% packet loss and the database server is working just fine, but when it goes to 50% packet loss, it tips over, that doesn't mean everything was working properly before the incident. PagerDuty includes a postmortem builder now in our product, which assists significantly in gathering timelines and pulling together reports after an incident. You can pull in information from chat, you can pull in information from your monitoring systems. Especially as a subject matter expert, it's crucial within the first 24 to 48 hours that you go back through that problem that you experienced and capture the details while they're still fresh in your mind. especially annotating things within that timeline, becomes really valuable down the road when you start to ask, have we seen a similar problem before? Of course, the impact to your response team is a part of your incident review process as well. Don't forget the humans. On-call shift coverage, missing runbook documentation, prioritization of efforts within a team, all of them should be discussed, at least at some level, during your postmortem. Something to consider when you aren't dealing with an incident is to practice doing them. It's better to go through the motions, verify on-call schedules, monitoring behavior, runbook coverage, and so on at 3 p.m. in the afternoon, surrounded by your team and with nothing on fire, than half remembering the process you've only done once at 3 a.m. when you're all alone. A really great way to practice that has other benefits for your infrastructure and your company is through the idea of injecting controlled failure into your infrastructure. Netflix, for example, has Chaos Monkey, which is a tool that goes out and introduces failure into single or multiple sets of machines within their environment. Game days or failure Fridays are all things that other companies do as well. It lets you exercise the whole process end to end. Injection of failure, verification of monitoring coverage, spinning up and practicing your incident response process, all while you're hopefully not actually impacting your customers, but you're building that muscle memory. So here's a quick summary of what we've talked about today. Have clearly agreed upon severities. Have structure in place beforehand. As a subject matter expert, it's crucial that you offer explicit status updates. As a group, make clear decisions about what your next steps are. Ensure that your postmortems are blameless, and practice as much as you can. If that summary wasn't enough, you can find out about our incident response process by going to response.pagerduty.com. We've open sourced all of our internal documentation, as well as links to other resources and other organizations doing this that you'll find valuable. And with that, we're going to open up for questions. Hit the refresh here. So we have one question from Ansi. What if there is no incident commander available? Especially if you join a call as a subject matter expert and you ask, hey, is there an incident commander there? You have two different choices. One is that you, if you feel appropriate, can escalate yourself in your role to become an incident commander. And there's more about this in the previous webinar. However, the other side of this is that just like you have teams that are on call for their own services and their own things that they need to respond to as subject matter experts, I'd recommend that you have an on-call rotation for your incident commanders. And so when you join that call and there is no incident commander, it falls to you to then go find that rotation and make sure that that incident commander becomes engaged. I think that's all we have for questions. One last thing to leave you with before we end the session for today is that we'll be doing hands-on incident command and response training. Oh, I saw someone just put in a question here real quick, so I will finish this and then I'll answer that question. We'll be doing hands-on incident command and response training at PagerDuty University at our PagerDuty Summit here September 6th through the 7th. We'll be doing hands-on workshops, interactive deep dives, the sort of thing that involves training in multiple groups and doing back and forth mock exercises for being both an incident commander and an incident responder. Let me answer that question real quick from Aman. Let's see here. Can you elaborate on the sources for postmortems in PagerDuty? So the PagerDuty postmortem tool has basically an ability to pull in information from multiple incidents within PagerDuty. It has the ability to pull in from chat tools, both Slack and HipChat. It also has the ability to add in